G'day guys, Mac with the Outer Circle, and welcome to another episode in Getting Started in the Horus Heresy. So, every day I get messages from people who want help creating their lists, and I'm more than happy to help them. But I'm limited on time, so instead in today's episode, I want to give you some ideas of lists which someone could construct. These aren't lists in the traditional sense, such as points levels and things like that. No. This is the 1,000-foot overview of theming a force, building upon our last video. There's basically 4 steps here. One of them is really easy. First one is finding a theme. The second is selecting your units. The third is selecting the scheme. And the fourth is making it happen. So, there are many things one can choose from. Since I've previously mentioned Ultramarines Destroyers and did a video on that, on my own force and the unit selection in it, we're going to do something similar today, and we're going to talk about some stories or chapters from in the novels or the black books, and how you can expand upon those to create a different force, rather than just going for the traditional Legion. So, with that in mind, what we'll do is we'll talk about a force I've also previously covered, but not to a great extent, and that is the White Scars Sagyamazan. So, what are the Sagyamazan? Well, the novels Scars and Path of Heaven set them up nicely. The Sagyamazan are disgraced warriors. They're troops who wanted to initially side with Horus, without understanding the true nature of his actions. Now for this decision, the Khan punished them, and rather than executing them, which is a waste of good Astartes in a time where they needed to have as many loyalists as possible, he decided to utilise them. Now this force could be rebuked, but you couldn't just let them off. There must be a punishment. So the force was exiled and told to redeem their honour in glorious combat. The Sagyamazan then conducted years of grueling behind enemy lines attacks on the traitors, with the most famous force meeting their end at the hands of Mortarion himself in one badass scene. So that's the theme. Now selecting the units for this force. Well, how do you realise on the tabletop? The first thing is, Sagyamazan are a splinter force. They're deprived of their Legion armory, and a lot of that equipment. Therefore, they have much lighter assets than traditional forces. I don't think that heavy armor or cutting-edge technology should be theirs, and thus, few to no dreadnoughts and no tanks. But, being Scars, they can make up for this with an emphasis on units like the Ebon Keshig, a specialist unit of Terminators which is made up of Dishonored warriors in particular, along with access to jet bikes. Seeing that many of the Dishonored are also Terran veterans, it gives you a chance to move away from the traditional combat style of the White Scars, which is, bikes, and the traditional look of the White Scars, because these warriors just aren't as ingrained into the Central and East Asian cultural norms of the Legion. Seeing that many of these troops served alongside the Lunar Wolves in the Crusade and acted as Pathfinders, recon units, and heavy assault forces, it actually ties in really nicely with this because you can fall back on those themes. And lastly, since the force lacks a lot of armor, tanks, that kind of thing, well, their Shattered Legion nature means that they should supplement their force with traditional allies from the novels, such as the Raven Guard, the Iron Hands, the Salamanders, and the Space Wolves, and they even have a unique Rite of War to represent this. These particular forces contribute units which the White Scars lack, allowing you to keep the theme of Dishonored warriors who are light on equipment, but supplementing it into a full list with something like, say, Salamanders who bring along flame-wielding dreadnoughts, as an example. So, once you've got the theme, once you've selected your units, you now have to pick the colour scheme. Now, this isn't just the paint job. This is the conversions and the little accessories that add character to your force. So, with a force like this, do you have to commit to regular Scars colours? Well, no. The Dishonored often wore black armour with white shoulder pads, as in the Ebon Keshig. You can supplement in new patterns and markings, as these ad hoc formations have developed new markings as the war dictated. And they also scavenge armour from other legions, so mixing colour palettes and armour types will greatly add to the theme. And then, step 4. Make it happen. Just get out there and do it. So, that's one formation. Let's try another. Let's look at, say, the Raven Guard. Raven Guard are a much, much less played legion. But who would be a cool alternative to the traditional force? Because a lot of people don't enjoy painting the black of the Raven Guard. Well, here's one for you. When Corax was first discovered, the Great Crusade was well over a century old. His legion had grown without him and spent much of their time amongst the savage lunar wolves, and the recruits of the 19th were mostly made up of crime gangs from the modern parts of the Earth we would call, say, Indonesia, Northern Australia, and the Pacific Islands. These crime gangs included tribal cannibals, bikies, and Yakuza types. The area was well known on Terra as the Indonesian Bloc, and in the heat of battle, these forces developed a bloodlust akin to the Blood Angels' red thirst, complete with pale skin and jet black eyes, which was caused by a mutation in their gene seed. Now, when Corax met this savage and bloodthirsty force, he was completely appalled. Rather than keep the worst of these guys and potentially corrupt the new inductees of the Legion, he instead expelled the less desirable, most bloodthirsty guys from the Legion. And the Clad, which was the name of this 19th Legion pre-Corax, pre-Raven Guard, well, the Clad became a wandering crusade fleet, always hanging around the edge of the Imperium on the forefront, the spear tip of the Great Crusade. Unknown and unwanted. These forces eventually joined with the Night Lord's elements to create a Black Shields force, which is eerily similar to the Carcharodon's chapter of 40k, right down to the colour scheme and markings. So that's your theme. Step 2, select your units. Now, it's noted in the book Extermination, that's book 3, the Black Books, how the force included many Terminators and sort of Proto-Reaver or Reaver-like units, like the Sons of Horus. Therefore, these make a perfect place to start. Whilst Raven Guard Legion rules would work, and they would work very well, because things like Terminators with Furious Charge is terrifying. Well, Black Shield's rules work perfectly, as do Night Lord's rules, representing that bloodthirsty nature, or even Sons of Horus rules, which are very similar again, and would unlock things like the Reavers. Since you also don't have the depleted armory, because these units did take quite a lot of equipment with them when they were exiled, it means you can utilize a lot of equipment you typically wouldn't see in a Raven Guard army as well. With the caveat, I will add, that probably should be older equipment. So maybe leave the Sicarans, Javelin Land Spears, and Leviathans at home and focus on things like Predator Strike Squadrons, Whirlwind Scorpius you might be able to get away with, some of the older variants of Land Raiders, Vindicators, Malkadors. Malkador's a fantastic force to include Malkador battle tanks in. So that's your units. And then, of course, selecting a scheme. Well, the scheme should be a variant of the 40k Carcharodons in a lot of ways, because I guess in all intents and purposes, they're the descendants of these guys. You could fuse it as well with the Night Lord's own colour palette or trimmings. A colour scheme you could pick is, instead of the rich blue armour and lightning of the Night Lords, imagine grey armour with charcoal shoulder pads and then skulls and human flesh decorating these guys who've fallen back on their savage warrior tribe ways. Isn't that an interesting theme? And of course, step 4, make it happen. Get out there, pick up a model, do a test scheme, paint it up. The world is your oyster. Now, what's another one we could do? Well, we could look at a Loyalist Iron Warriors force. The forces of Keir Valen immediately come to mind. The Battle of Paramar, also from Book 3 of the Horus Heresy Black Books range, Extermination. In this book, we find out the Alpha Legion make a strike on the Loyalist Forge World of Paramar, a key strategic point. And it just so happens that a force of Iron Warriors is also on this world. Now, these Iron Warriors aren't in on the plan. They are not traitors, nor are they really Loyalists at this stage, but they soon become Loyalists because they get attacked by the Alpha Legion. Now, the Alpha Legion has a slight problem here. They're pretty good at, doing Alpha Legion stuff, which is infiltration and headhunter tactics. The problem is they're going up against Iron Warriors in a fortified position. So needless to say, it's a bloodbath. And although the Iron Warriors do lose the fight on the surface of the planet and it falls to them, Loyalist elements of the Mechanicum and a lot of Iron Warriors, including Keir Valen himself, manage to escape into the cavernous Forge World's underhive beneath the planet's crust and carry on a guerrilla fight. Now, there's multiple ways you can play this up. Paramar is a world that trades hands many times throughout the Horus Heresy, and so it can be played as you are the initial force of Iron Warriors in your theme, where they are taking on the Alpha Legion. So it's a grand battalion, lots of heavy vehicles, lots of artillery, all the toys the Night Lords, the Iron Warriors have. Minus, of course, the Iron Circle, because they're not a part of Perturabo's forces and they wouldn't have access to them yet. So that's a restriction you should be placing onto yourself. Of course, you're allied with Mechanicum in this battle, which means you can include a lot of automata. Iron Warriors do this better than most to begin with, because they can take things like Cortex controllers on their warlords, their warsmiths, and you could do this here with Keir Valen himself if you want to take the special character. You could also do it with just a generic warsmith if you so desired. So you can include a lot of Castellax or maybe Vorax and Pravians. You could include Domitar in the force. You can do a lot of stuff with this. And then, once you've got to that point, you could say that's the force that fought the Alpha Legion. But then you could also have the force after the fight with the Alpha Legion, where they become a Zone Mortalis force, fighting with Mechanicum against the Alpha Legion invaders and the War Master's allies, and they're a infantry horde. So lots of tactical marines, heavy weapon squads, dreadnoughts, and again more automata like Castellax and Thalax and things like that, which forms this force that fights in the underground caverns of this Mechanicum world, in the caves and in the catacombs. So there's two different styles right there. Then you have the third type of force, which is after the Imperium retakes the world. And here you get to have a lot of fun, because you're talking typical Imperial allies become available to you. You could have Imperial Army, you could have other Legion forces, you can rebuild this Grand Battalion so that they've got a lot of heavy equipment again, you can add Mechanicum forces in still, you could add in things like Custodes or Sisters of Silence. The world is your oyster, and you have multiple time periods you can set this thing in. For those who are familiar with other games like, say, Bolt Action, where you might have like an early war and late war forces, well, it's kind of the same thing here. You can create for yourself this restriction. So the selecting of your units is great fun here and ties in with the theme really well. And by making one army, you could break up this one army into these various sub-forces based on the campaigns you're playing. 3 distinct sub-armies. Of course, when it comes to selecting a scheme, well, we know the Iron Warriors colours very well. So you essentially just can do those. And it also gives you the chance that you could also play them as traitor Iron Warriors if you so desired. Now, this sort of thing goes hand in hand throughout the Horus Heresy, and there are many stories like this. I've chosen 3 here today to try and illustrate the point to you guys. I don't need to make a very long video here, but when it comes to selecting a force and finding that theme, this is how I like to do it. The rules, the combat viability of the force, that comes second, because it really doesn't matter. Heresy is balanced enough that most things you make an army out of will play and perfectly satisfy you. It's very few forces in the Horus Heresy that kind of suck. Very few. So it's not something that should really be on your mind. And really, it's not the kind of game that rewards such behavior. So make it fun. Find a theme, tell a story. It can be a traditional Legion theme, by all means. Or it can be one of these little sub-stories. And there are sub-stories for many, many different forces within the Horus Heresy. Anyway, I'm Mac with the Outer Circle. Thank you all for watching this episode. I hope you all enjoy it, and I'll see you all on the next one.